serious, lawyers who have defended clients that had done horrible stuff. How did it make you feel? Some days it's really hard. Defending violent people that have harmed others has desensitized me to violence. I can read reports, see pictures and interview victims with little or no emotional reaction. I found it's a different feeling when assigned cases by the public defender versus meeting with people accused of crimes and taking a lot of their money to represent them. I don't take clients that have hurt kids anymore. A couple in a row ducked me up and I can't compartmentalize my emotions from really analyzing the case. I beat a DUI, driving under the influence, case recently, and my client hugged me and his breath reeked of alcohol. At 10 AM. He said he had driven to court. I insisted he let me call an Uber. See? Knowing that he got off scot-free and most likely didn't learn a lesson or get rehabilitated. And knowing he'll be back on the road to possibly injure or kill innocent drivers. I couldn't handle defending that. I've represented robbers, dealers, everybody. But the one crime that I particularly don't like handling is DUI. I have a theory that, for the most part, I can avoid being the victim of most crimes. I don't do drugs. I don't hang out in bad neighborhoods. I lock my car, house etc. But there is absolutely nothing I can do to prevent being held by a drunk driving on the wrong side of the highway with no headlights on. This terrifies me and sickens me. I don't do criminal law anymore, but one summer I worked on a team of public defenders representing a woman who had shot her, reportedly very nice, husband for $60,000 in insurance money. My job was basically just to try to talk her into confessing and taking the plea bargain. Because it was obvious that she'd done it, her fingerprints all over her gun. Her alibi was proven false, etc. But she insisted on this half-cocked story about how it had to have been a burglar and spent all of her time feeling sorry for herself. The prosecutor had offered her 5 years. She insisted on going to trial and got 55. I think she's still there. I'm not a bit sad about it. Should have took the 5 years. Why would it be a good idea to go to trial when you know your bullshit is gonna get you more? She said God would prove her innocent. God would have been a lot more help if she'd considered a consultation before she shot her husband 6 times in the back as he was walking out of the shower. IMHO. I've said this before, but I bailed on family court. Did it for like a month. I had to sit there, expressionless, 4 hours while I listened to some horrid shit involving abuse and justification for it. I took a downgrade to workers' comp until I found something I could live with. That said, God bless everyone involved in family court. During my internship, I was part of a team that defended some persons accused for the conspiracy and execution of a group of journalists. It was hard. But the big thing that people forget is that lawyers don't have to believe in the innocence of the accused. You just have to make sure that justice is done. I personally was racked with guilt and didn't believe it one bit. But somebody has to represent the accused. This is right. A buddy of mine who is from Colombia was stopped at the airport from a trip to South America and they checked some over-the-counter drugs, tested positive for being a illegal drug. He got a lawyer to represent him and the lawyer helped him get the drugs retested and they came back negative. Then lawyer got them to dismiss the case. After it all, the lay was sorry to my friend. He admitted at first thought he was guilty. He never believed that the brown guy from Colombia that has a substance that is tested to be a illegal drug is innocent. Doesn't matter what the lawyer thinks. If everyone does their job right, it will work out best in long run. Fine. At the end of the day I go home. And if the prosecutor did his job correctly, then that person goes to jail. I'm not going to make it easy for the DA. But I've stopped losing sleep, except when in trial, thinking about it. Over a week, I installed a network for a defense lawyer as he was setting up a new office, and we had some pretty candid conversations about all of the garbage he has represented in the past. Near the end, I asked him this exact question. This was his answer. If I've done my job as a defense lawyer, and I've fought for and protected my clients to the absolute best of my ability according to all technical aspects of the law, Then when they get that guilty verdict, I know that I've closed up as many loopholes for appeals, mistrials, and ways for them to go free. And that's how I sleep at night. Late to this thread, but I've been a public defender for many years. I find that for me, it's not the crime that I find hard to deal with, it's the person. So I can have someone charged with something really horrible, and I might still like them as a person. Or I could have someone charged with shoplifting, and I think they are a jerk. I have only one case in my mind where I intensely disliked the client and they did really horrible stuff. I worked my ass off, with others, to ensure this person didn't get the death penalty. But if they got struck by lightning one day, I wouldn't be sad. In any case, when you are in lawyer mode, you think like a lawyer, and compartmentalize a bit. There's also a small sense of pride in being committed enough to the cause to handle even the bad stuff. But also, most people charged with crimes are just people. Some are awesome. Some are jerks. Some people do bad things and feel really terrible about it. Others blame everyone else but themselves. Some people are so trapped in their trauma or addiction or mental illness that it overshadows everything. The job is to hold the state to its burden of proof, and to challenge any constitutional violations on behalf of the client. It seems to be difficult for some people. But if you just withhold your own judgment and let the process work, there's no feeling of guilt in it. That said, it can be gross to sit next to some folks. But it's never gross to challenge the state's case and make the argument that there's not enough evidence to convict. It makes me feel goodish, if that makes sense. As a lawyer, I do sports law now. But did public defender work to start? You know you have to defend guilty people. I have got people I know are guilty of crimes because it is my job. You become a lawyer not to get rich, though some do. You do it because you know everyone deserves a fair shake. And the same rights. You have to separate yourself from things though, and not bring your work home. For every 10 people that did horrible stuff, you will get one mom who was in a bad place. Or a guy the police got the wrong person. Getting that person off that is not guilty is what drives you and motivates you continue down the path. The worst people to defend are people that did a shitty thing and think they understand the law. You just want to slap them. First of all, you very rarely know that clients have done horrible things because you make a habit to not ask questions that you don't want answers to. And the number of times I've had clients change their story is staggering, so I go in with an attitude that I don't know the facts. I know only the case the state is trying to make. Even when you do absolutely know that they did it, I have no problem with zealously defending them. It isn't about the individual. It's about the system. The reason that I do what I do is that dirty cops scare the hell out of me. And there are an awful lot of them out there. As soon as we as defense attorneys stop defending people that we think are guilty, the state gets to make cases that they shouldn't based upon bad evidence provided by bad cops. By defending everyone with zeal and vigor regardless of personal feelings, we make sure to the best of our ability that the state is honest and convicting fewer innocent people. At the end of the day, I feel better about having 10 child rapists go free than having one person falsely convicted and incarcerated for life because he got on the bad side of a bad cop who thinks he is the law. I work in family law. I used to work for a boutique firm that represented high net worth individuals, 90% of whom were reprehensible. I managed to compartmentalize many of their actions, including infidelity and hiding money. But it drained my soul to represent people who I knew were abusive and controlling spouses, and people who use their children as pawns to seek revenge or exert control over their exes. After about 5 years, I was so burned out and depressed, almost suicidal. I quit my job and tried for a long time to find work outside the legal field. Unfortunately, that was basically impossible. So I went back to family law, but in a different capacity. Some of the work I do is in the non-profit sector for low-income clients. And the vast majority of those clients are far more pleasant to deal with than the clients at the fancy law firm. I also work on a freelance basis for rather large private practices. Just piecemeal projects like writing motions, doing research projects, and reviewing discovery. I don't have to deal with any clients directly, so I'm insulated from the drama. I'm thinking of starting my own law firm specializing in mediation and collaborative divorce. I'd much rather work with clients who are into conscious uncoupling, even though it means they won't rack up huge bills. At least I'd feel like I was helping someone at the end of the day, which is the whole reason I wanted to be a lawyer in the first place. My father spent his working life first in criminal defense, 30-ish years, and then prosecution for the remainder of his career, until he retired early for stress-related reasons. I don't recall any specifics because the worst cases were when I was young and he obviously kept details from us. Suffice to say that he was incredibly stressed throughout his working life, and it gave him a badly colored view of people in general. Once he retired, he worked doing something very manual and highly skilled and was like a different person. Much easier to get on with. Law can do bad things to the people who work in it. I'm a public defender. I don't get to pick my clients or the kinds of cases I get. However, I believe in the mission to give everyone effective assistance of counsel regardless of the amount of money they have. It's a right we all have as Americans, and it's my job to be a champion for the Constitution, so to speak. I do a lot of mental gymnastics to do what I do. I have to separate the person in front of me from the crime they are alleged to have committed. I have to doubt the state's account as much as I can reasonably do so. At the end of the day, I wasn't there, and I don't know for sure what happened. Honestly, it's hardest for me to represent a client who is mean to me personally. If a client is mean or abusive to me, but charged with something less serious or non-violent, that's harder than representing someone who allegedly did something heinous but treats me with respect. I recognize to a certain extent I have to earn their trust, but there's something to be said for treating your lawyers civilly. At the end of the day, none of us are as bad as the worst thing we've ever done. That doesn't excuse our behavior, but I think every person has at least a small amount of redeeming quality that I can use to help me justify my job. Slightly relevant. My mum is a psychologist, and I remember she used to visit prisons when I was growing up as part of work. She wasn't allowed to talk about it due to confidentiality, but I overheard her once talking to my dad. She had just been to see a guy who was doing life for grape. And of course, as part of her job, she has to be unbiased and objective despite the severity of the crime. The grape had been brutal. A young woman. But what was significant about this particular case was the fact that 2 weeks prior she had been with a client who matched the profile of the girl he described. And she had recounted the same details about the event. My mum realized she was the psychologist for both the rapist and the victim. I think that was the only time she was ever explicitly affected by her work in front of me. But I suppose you see so many, eventually you just have to separate yourself from the job. But I know seeing the girl made it harder for her to have any kind of empathy for him. Not great. I will help someone who has a contractual right to a defense. But it doesn't make me feel good to know I'm helping someone who, to give a few examples, took advantage of another human being, often sexually, or who is clearly committing fraud. In the end, I tell myself everyone deserves a meaningful defense and that there are two sides to every coin. Lucky for me, these sorts of files are few and far between. I spoke with a defense attorney about this once. She said that she went from prosecution to defense, which is an interesting flip. She stated that she believed everyone had a right to competent legal representation and isn't necessarily trying to get them out of a crime, but trying to make sure that they are accurately navigated through the legal system and that their rights are protected. I thought that was a great explanation. As I said in the other post, as a law student, it's your ethical duty to zealously defend your client. There are a few great books on this, but essentially the very root of this goes back to how Adams represented the soldiers in the Boston Massacre. Everyone deserves defense. My girlfriend is a criminal defense attorney, and I asked this exact question once when we first started dating. She told me is able to compartmentalize really well, but some things definitely get to her. I work as a paralegal in criminal defense. We haven't represented clients who hurt other adults unprovoked. But we have represented a few of what I would call the worst type of people. Child molesters. It's ducking unnerving how they can justify the sheet. I have 3 young children, under the age of 14. And I'm still pretty young myself. Those defendants are master manipulators. And are constantly looking for a way in with you. I keep photos of my children in my desk. Not on display. And don't say anything more than absolutely necessary to these people. It annoys me when this topic pops up in the cycle because it quietly implies that some people shouldn't have a good defense lawyer. It assumes that the defendant is always guilty. Maybe the defendant is guilty of something but not of the charges. Maybe the defendant is guilty but not to the same degree. Maybe the police or the prosecution didn't do their jobs properly. Or worse. Fabricated evidence or coerced testimony. Maybe the case relies on the appearance of doing wrong leading to a crime. But they are only guilty of being immoral. Or maybe they just didn't do it. While the justice system is far from perfect. Everyone should have a fair trial. It really disturbs me that some people are happy and comfortable denying an accused murderer or pedophile a lawyer or even a trial simply because the police put them in cuffs. I didn't feel any particular thing. Me defending them is not me condoning what they did. Everyone needs a defense to make the system work correctly, even and especially the guilty ones. Now there were certainly people I represented who did terrible things and I hated that. But they did those things whether I am exposed to it or not, and someone needed to defend them, and at that time it was my job to do so. Nowadays and for the bulk of my career I've done civil work. But in the early days of my career I did a lot of criminal defense and even did a swim through the Tulsa County Public Defender's Office where I ended up representing the worst of the bad offenders in my career. But also the stories that people mostly want to hear come from that same period of time. Is it unavoidable to work a little less hard as an attorney for people you find repugnant? Or does it make you work even harder to make sure that there can be no basis for appeal? Well, I remember that I am only one part of the system. There is opposing counsel, judge and jury. I present my client's case and don't use my own judgment about it. If I win, then I don't feel bad. I'm doing my job. If I lose, then I also don't feel bad because I tried my best. I slept well and it really didn't stick with me. I defended a molester of a stepdaughter. She crawled into his bed when he was half asleep. Was he lying when he said that he was so tired that he didn't realize it was her? I don't know. Hard to mistake a small 13-year-old for her 200-pound plus mother, but had just worked a double shift and he was in his bed. Not hers. But I had to present the argument. The prosecutor has to prove that it happened beyond a reasonable doubt. Convicted. 1-year sentence. The only client I ever refused to represent was in family law. Husband wanted custody of kid. Wife was suicidal depressed. The guy was joking about how much his life would be easier when she finally healed herself and how much he was looking forward to it. When she went to the bathroom to slit her wrists, he waited outside for an hour hoping she'd have the guts to do it. She didn't go through with it. I refuse to represent the ducker. I may be a hired gun, but I do have some small standards. I'm not a lawyer, but I have worked in several law offices and am married to an attorney. My husband does personal injury mostly. And what he really hates is having to negotiate down child support arrears in order to get his clients their payouts. He's got a son from a fling a while back. And doesn't have a great relationship with his son's mother for a host of reasons. But he's never missed a single payment. Even when he was navigating law school and I was on disability trying to raise our own newborn daughter. So he thinks deadbeat parents, defined as folks who have chosen not to pay to spite their exes, are scum of the earth. And if he had his way, he'd redirect their settlement payouts to that instead. He also hates learning that a client is a sex offender. And has said it makes him physically ill to interact with those clients. There is, I think, a sense of pride in a job well and professionally done, tempered with the OMG I just put a, insert crime, back on the street in the community where I live. One must always keep in mind that we are responsible to them, not for them. It made me feel 10k to 75k richer. Wife's cousin was a defense lawyer and is now judge. And he had several high-profile cases defending some people who had done pretty low stuff. I asked him about it and how he feels about doing that job. He looked at me, shrugged his shoulders and said, just know that the system works. What I got from that answer and knowing him was that he was playing his part in the system that will convict and punish these people. And he was okay with that role. Let's say that when he lost those cases, as he would inevitably, he wasn't losing any sleep over his clients doing time. I really have no issues with it. It's just a job you do and whatever they allegedly did is just words on a piece of paper to me. If something happened to me personally I'd feel different, but I just separate my personal feelings from whatever they're accused of. Of course I'd never personally associate with these people or ask them to babysit for me. I'm a lawyer but not a criminal defense attorney. When I was a law student, I did an internship with the Army JAG and got to watch court-martials. I asked the defense attorney how he handled cases where someone was accused of doing something horrible. He said his job wasn't to get the accused off, but rather to make sure the prosecution did its job of proving its case against the accused before the judge or panel, JAG term for jury, made their decision regarding the person's guilt. Question: what if you know they did it, like they confessed to you in private or something, but they are about to walk out free for some reason? Like the police never found the weapon, DNA etc. Would it be against the rules, ethics, conflict of interests for the defense lawyer to let slip some detail that gets them convicted? Or would you just be labeled a crappy defense lawyer, getting a fast ticket to unemployment? It would be a clear ethical violation. The lawyer would be sanctioned, possibly disbarred and sued. Additionally, the client may have a reason to appeal any sentence based on the attorney's unethical behavior as a due process violation if the state benefited from it. My best friend is a lawyer who works for the federal defenders, the people who represent those on death row as a last line of defense before execution. First, they do not make a lot of money. They aren't in it for that. They are in it because they don't believe these people need to be held, particularly in such a horrendous way like lethal injection. A firing squad or hanging is more humane. She actually changed my view of the subject. These people did horrible things. Not trying to justify that in any regard. But a lot of the times they were also screwed over by a corrupt system or made an example of. Almost all are severely mentally ill or disabled and grew up in absolutely sickening cases of abuse. Sadly, it is very rare they win a case. So yeah. She calls me anytime she is ever alone in a parking lot. It's made her 100x more paranoid. But there's also some sense of doing what's right even when everyone else is against you. Nothing. Really. You become really desensitized from stuff. You're focused so much on the case, client management, judge management, etc. that you don't have time to worry about that stuff. Especially when constitutional violations are in play. That being said, I avoided the public defender's office so that I could choose my cases and don't have to take child rapists, etc. Tennessee has a new slowpoke law. I could never represent one of those monsters. I ended up getting out of criminal law because you just get tired of dealing with the scum of the earth. Whether it's your clients or not. That criminal courthouse is a ducking train wreck and it gets old.